Welcome back in, everybody, to the Stadium Seat Sports Podcast. As always, I'm Coop here with my partner and co-host Kriv. In this video, we're going to be previewing the upcoming Week 6 games here in college football. In this preview, we got 4 games for you, including one upset alert game. So to be sure to continue to listen to the end of the video for that one. So the first game we're going to kick off with is going to be Michigan taking on Washington in a national championship rematch from last year. So, Kriv, take it away.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you said it's a national championship rematch because, in all honesty, even with Michigan being a number 10 overall team in the country, you don't really think of them as a national title contending team, at least how they've looked the first few weeks. And Washington, as we all know, definitely is not a national championship team. Losing their entire coaching staff and a number of players. But for me, I think it's very interesting that the number 10 team goes on the road against an unranked team and the spread's -1.5. And for me, what travels best on the road is a run game and a defense. And that is what Michigan has. I do think they're going to have a little trouble with Will Rogers. He's been very efficient and he's played pretty well. And of course, he's super experienced. He's played a lot of college ball, so that's going to give them some issues there. But really, as I said before, I think it's going to be a close game, but that the run game with Mullins and that defense, especially that defensive line for Michigan, I think it's going to be the difference maker here. And it's going to be a low-scoring, tight game, but I think Michigan wins this game.
Yeah, I mean, look, you made some good points. I'm gonna actually go the opposite direction. I'm going to take Washington in this game, which is the favorite, as you pointed out, which is really a kind of abnormal given that Michigan, like you said, is a number 10 team, even though Washington is at home. The reason I'm going to go with Washington, you hit on it. Will Rogers has been really, really good for Washington so far this year. I mean, he's got 10 total touchdowns. He doesn't have any picks. Like, he has been really a catalyst for this team. And I know they're 3-2. They're not 5-0. They're not 4-1. Like, they're not, any team that's going to make any kind of significant noise when it comes to the playoff picture this year. But he has really been a kind of a steadying point for them. And defense and a run game does travel, and that both favors Michigan in this game. But Kriv, let's just play this scenario out. If Washington gets the ball first, Will Rogers, leads them down the field. They get a 7-0 lead. Michigan goes 3-and-out in their first series. Will Rogers leads them down. Let's say they get a field goal. I don't trust Michigan to be able to throw the ball and come back in a game. So if they get the lead, then that run game, that defense is incredibly efficient. But if Washington takes the lead, Michigan has a turnover, Washington gets the ball first, and Michigan has to throw the ball. We just all know that so far this year, they've not been capable of doing so. And I could see that happening in this game where they find themselves down and have to throw the ball and are unsuccessful in doing so. So I'm gonna go opposite here of you and take Washington in this game.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening. And I think that's a great call out where if they fall behind, it's a different game. And it's a lot harder to come back when you have to run the ball to move the ball every play. So great point there.
Thanks.
All right, and then the next game, I think it's the only ranked versus ranked team matchup this week, and it's an SEC game. It's number 9 Missouri at number 25 Texas A&M, and I'll let you kick things off here.
Yeah, you know what? This one is really, really an interesting game for me, and I mean, this is similar to the Michigan-Washington game. Missouri's the number 9 team in the country, sitting there 4-0. Texas A&M's 25 as we talk about this, 4-1. I know it's at home for Texas A&M. It's at Kyle Field. Texas A&M is a 2-point favorite, which is when you're the number 9 team in the country. I know Texas A&M is ranked, they're number 25, but to be a 2-point dog, even going on the road, I think kind of tells you everything there is about this Missouri team, at this point in this season. Like, Missouri has had some close calls this year, and they were one of those teams that, like, you had Cook coming back at quarterback. You have just an unbelievable, I think, the world of Missouri's head coach. Is it Drinkowitz? I can't remember exactly how to what his last name is, but I think the world of their head coach. I think Cook is an incredible quarterback, but so far this year, Cook has been really underwhelming. like Luther Burden, another guy for Missouri that you're just like, man, this team could actually make some noise. They ended the year on a great note last year, but I think ever since Texas A&M brought Reed in at quarterback, they've been a significantly improved team. Obviously, they lost that week 1 matchup against Notre Dame. I think Texas A&M is kind of a sneaky team, not necessarily, a pick for me that would make the 12-team playoff or a national championship or anything like that, but a team that you don't necessarily want to play. And I think this Missouri team is going to take their first loss of the year. I know they're ranked number 9. I think that they have all the potential in the world, but Texas A&M to me has been playing better over the last several weeks. Missouri did have an off week last week, but ultimately, I'm going to take Texas A&M in this game, and I would take Texas A&M to cover. I know it's only a 2-point spread, so they only need to win by a field goal or more, but I'm going to take them to probably win by like a touchdown or more is what I'm gonna pick.
Okay, well, you know what? I think today's the day that we disagree more than we have on any other episode, because I think this is going to be the game where Missouri kind of awakens the sleeping giant. Looking back to that week 1 game for Texas A&M, the one thing that stood out to me was they had trouble defending the run. And I think Nate Noel on Missouri is going to run wild. He has almost 500 yards already this season, averaged 6.4 yards a carry. I mean, he is a dynamic back, and I think he's going to really hit some big runs here and open this game up. And then also, you kind of touched on it. Between Cook and Luther Burden, it's been kind of disappointing. And I just think it's a ticking time bomb, and they're going to explode. I think that you're going to see Luther Burden show what everyone expected at the start of the season and get his name back out there and remind everyone that he is one of the best receivers in college football this week. So I have Missouri winning. I think it will be competitive, but I think between Burden and the run game, I think they're gonna pull it out here on the road.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, we might go complete opposite in all 4 of these matchups this week, and won't that be something? Because one of us probably going to look like a very smart man, and the other one not so much. So it'll be really, really interesting here. And the next game we're going to chat about here, obviously, Ohio State got its first Big Ten test last week against Michigan State, but you would absolutely say that this test up to this point is their biggest test so far, and that's taking on Iowa. So I'll let you kick this one off here. Excited to hear your thoughts on this, because this is a team we haven't talked about very much so far this year.
I think this is a great opportunity for Ohio State to really figure out who they are. And one of the things that stands out to me with Iowa is, one, obviously they always have one of the best coach defenses in the league. So Chip Kelly is going to have all his weapons going up against a defense like this. I think it's a great test and a great barometer for what they're going to be able to do against higher end talent teams later in the season, possibly even next week against Oregon. So that's an interesting part of the matchup here. And also, I think Iowa is sort of Michigan light in a sense, in the fact that they have an elite defense, a great run game with Caleb Johnson, and they actually have a former Michigan quarterback, Hayden McNamara. So that Iowa offense has been better than it has in years past. I know that's not saying a whole lot, but I think it is noticeably better to where they're actually competent to an extent. So this is going to be a tough matchup for Ohio State. The biggest thing I'm looking for from them in this game, because I think their offense will ultimately overcome Iowa's defense, because all things being equal, Ohio State's talent is going to be the separator there. And they're going to win this game. And I think they'll probably cover the 18.5 point spread as well. But the other thing I want to see is how this defensive line, especially the interior of Ohio State, handles Caleb Johnson, and how those linebackers handle Caleb Johnson, because they have struggled a tiny bit these last few weeks. Obviously, Tyleik Williams has been out. But they need to show something here, because a lot of their biggest opponents, especially that team up north at the end of the year, they're going to play a similar style, so they need to be ready. So it'll tell us a lot. I think Ohio State wins this game still without much concern, but it's going to show if they have any weaknesses or not, and what they have to figure out before these games pick up in intensity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to make a quick correction for any of our viewers or listeners. The spread in Missouri and Texas A&M is actually 2.5 at this point towards Texas A&M. It opened at 2. So just a little correction there, but not much of a difference. No, so in talking about this game, like I, kind of mentioned in the intro for this game before throwing it over to you, this is going to be Ohio State's stiffest test up to this point. And I think this is where we're really going to see if Ohio State is that team, is championship caliber. And I'm not saying that because I think Iowa, like the world of Iowa. But what I mean by that is, number one, it's their stiffest test of the year. And it is a potential look ahead game because you have to travel to Eugene to face Oregon the very next week. So this will be a good kind of litmus test for this Ohio State team and Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, in keeping his team focused and prepared on the right now in facing Iowa and not looking ahead to that marquee matchup in Eugene under the Saturday night lights. Essentially, I think it's a 7:30 kickoff, so it'll be 4:30 over there in Oregon. And so I want to see if this team is poised and focused and comes out and just dominates the opponent in front of them this week, rather than looking forward to that, like I said, marquee matchup, probably the biggest game in the Big Ten all year long. And so I think Ohio State is going to cover in this game. I fully expect this Ohio State team to come out and kind of impose their will on this Iowa team. What I will be interested in, though, is really the strength of that Ohio State offense. I mean, you could really pick anywhere, but I would say it's just their ridiculous stable of running backs with Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson. I think Iowa has a top 5 rushing defense, or certainly top 10, but I believe it's in the top 5. And surprisingly, because Iowa always has a fantastic defense, as you mentioned, their passing defense is actually in the 60s, I believe. I think it's number 64 in the country right now, which is serviceable, certainly, but which is kind of surprising when you think about an Iowa defense, because you normally expect both of their units, both rushing defense and passing defense, to be within the top like 20 to 30 at most. So the actual kind of weakness, if you could even say there is one on this Iowa defense, seems to be their passing defense. I do think that Ohio State will have a balanced attack in getting Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson going, and I do think they'll lean on that a bit. But if it falls onto the shoulders of Howard, I want to see how he responds in that, in that regard, because we've talked about how incredibly talented this Ohio State team is. And we said Ohio State's going to go as far as, Will Howard allows them to go. Will Howard is a very serviceable quarterback. He's made some nice throws and nice plays this year, but he's going to have to show up in those big moments, or when it's put on him, if they take away the run game, so to speak, if there's ever such a thing against Ohio State with that ridiculous stable of running backs, it's going to be really interesting to see if he is put in that spot, how he responds. So we're going to learn a lot about Ohio State in so many ways in this game, and I'm very excited to see it because we've all been, itching as college football fans to just kind of see this team finally put up against a legit opponent and see what they're made of. And then from the Iowa perspective, you mentioned it, Iowa's always got a fantastic defense. They got a new offensive coordinator this year. And while they're no offensive juggernaut, their offense has been better than in years past. Again, not difficult to do. But Johnson at running back has been incredible. He's an Ohio kid. I'm sure people saw what he said, even if he had gotten an offer from Ohio State, that he wouldn't have, gone there because he wants to beat them. So that's always, adding a little bit of fuel to the fire there for both teams. So that'll be interesting to see.
That's a lie. But
yeah,
yes.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I absolutely agree with you there. McNamara has been nothing special, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions this year, but, at times he's been, able to kind of, be serviceable for them. So I think that this is going to be a hard fought, gritty game. And I would believe that, it'll be relatively close at halftime, and then I think Ohio State kind of just imposes their will and kind of leans on Iowa, and they end up breaking a little bit in the second half, and Ohio State ends up covering the spread. But super excited for this game. Outside of the ranked matchup we talked about with Missouri and Texas A&M, this is probably the game I'm most excited for because we're seeing Ohio State against a legit opponent at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the more we get to see this Ohio State team against better talent, the more we learn about them, which is what everyone wants to see. So
for sure.
And then here, the last game we have here is our upset of the week. And I'll let you kick things off here, but it's number 12 Ole Miss coming off a loss and traveling to South Carolina.
Yeah, this one is really interesting to me, and I can absolutely see where South Carolina wins this game. Look, Ole Miss, I thought highly of them coming into the season, and I do still think highly of them. I think Kentucky is an underrated team. I think Kentucky's defensive front is very, very good. Kentucky gave Georgia fits the week before. And so I think this Kentucky team, or 2 weeks prior, I think Georgia had a bye week after that Kentucky game, but same point. Kentucky gave Georgia fits, and their defensive front is very, very good. South Carolina's got a good defensive front as well. They got Stewart on there. I know he's a true freshman, but that man is an absolute game wrecker, and I expect him fully to eat in this game. And South Carolina's been playing some pretty solid football for this year. I mean, they're quietly sitting there at 3-1, and you know, they lost that very, very closely contested, somewhat controversial with some calls game against LSU. If they didn't lose that, they're sitting there at 4-0 and probably are ranked in the top 25, truthfully. And you might have a ranked matchup here. So I think South Carolina is a very dangerous team here for Ole Miss. I mean, I believe in Lane Kiffin as a coach, and I think the world of Jackson Dart. I think he's a great quarterback, one of the better quarterbacks that we have in college football this year. But Sellers has quietly been, you know, pretty decent and kind of matriculating before our eyes with South Carolina. Of course, he's made some mistakes, but he's very, very young. But he also shows flashes of being being that dude for South Carolina. I already mentioned Stewart on the defensive line for South Carolina that I think is going to have a monster game here. So I'm actually going to take South Carolina, not just in the spread, which is +9 as we speak. I'm going to take South Carolina to fully pull off the upset and just get the win over Ole Miss. I need to see it again from Ole Miss after suffering that loss to Kentucky that, you know, they are who we thought they were coming into the year. So I'm going to actually take South Carolina just to straight up win this game.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that happening. And I'm kind of teetering on saying outright, but the spread is currently -9. So I definitely think you take that. I think this is a one-score kind of game. And for me, two things. Trey Harris, he's coming off an injury, but he did just get upgraded. His status got upgraded. That's going to make it more likely he actually plays, which will be huge for Ole Miss. I mean, he is very dynamic, very deadly out there. I mean, he's 800 yards already on the season, which is absurd. So if he plays and he's close to 100%, that's great news for Ole Miss. But I think the one thing that works in South Carolina's favor here is there are two defensive ends, Kennard and, of course, the freshman sensation, Dylan Stewart. Both those guys get after the quarterback, and, of course, Ole Miss kind of leans on that pass game more than most teams do. So Jackson Dart's going to be back there. It could be a long day for him, especially on the road. So, yeah, I also like South Carolina here, and definitely against the spread.
Yeah, I think that has a very legit, chance of happening here. And I'm kind of glad that we had some opposite picks here. I think that, always makes for some interesting watching and texting back and forth during the games on Saturday, and some good content. So for everybody that, tunes into, any of our videos, and certainly this one, drop your thoughts down below in the comments section on YouTube. Let us know how you think these games are going to turn out. And we're excited to kind of see, if our predictions come to fruition here, and we'll see you guys in the next video.